Hey, everybody. Welcome to Simply Cyber Live, where we connect you with amazing cybersecurity professionals to share their experiences and contributions to the community. If you're a regular, welcome back, friend. And if you're new here, we encourage you to engage with chat. As you'll see, all the regulars doing Ask Questions of the guest. Jack's going to be a great one. And overall, I'd love for you to have a wonderful time. At the end of the day, that's like all we're doing here is being all about good times. So just if you do have a question for Jack, and you want to ask it, make sure that you let us know. Either put a Q in front of it or somehow indicate that it's for that instead of part of the normal discourse, and we'll definitely get that answered. It's going to be awesome today. Our guest today, as many of you know, is none other than Jack Rhysider, the mastermind behind the highly acclaimed Darknet Diaries podcast, which I might say, as of recording this right now, I looked it up right before, ranking number 6 in the United States in the technology category, which is just amazing. With a background in network security engineering, Jack appreciates the complexities and challenges that define today's cybersecurity landscapes. And Darknet Diaries has become a must listen for those fascinated by the tales of hackers, breaches, and shadowy digital exploits and degree mills. Darknet Diaries offers listeners a unique glimpse into the hidden parts of the internet, and Jack's storytelling prowess brings these stories to life, weaving together technical intricacies with human elements of cybersecurity. Now, beyond the podcast, Jack's contributions to the field, his dedication to uncovering the truth, and his ability to educate and engage with his audience showcase his expertise and his passion for cybersecurity and storytelling. So do me a favor, everybody in chat. You're already dropping the Oprah emotes. I see that, the spicies. Drop it, some clappy hands emotes as best we can for a round of applause as we welcome in the chat our friend and our newest guest, Jack Rhysider. Let's go get Jack to the show. What's up, Jack? How are you, man?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a great one. Now, Jack, many of you know you as the voice of Darknet Diaries, but can you actually share with us, what sparked the initial interest in doing the podcast and what challenges you faced in blending cybersecurity with storytelling? Not an easy feat, my man.
Yeah, there's probably like a million things that got me into wanting to do this, right? But as you were saying that intro and talking about like degree mills and stuff, I'd go to these conferences and I'd hear about all the APTs or the big breaches, and I'd be like, yeah, that's kind of the main talks, how to secure your environment, but what about getting phished, or what about like, accidentally buying a fake degree, or what about when a teenager is like swatting another teenager online? Who's solving this problem? Like, you go to RSA conference and you're like, all right, who's the one solving this swatting issue that we have? And the swatting issue, how is that a cybersecurity thing? And I'm just like, the lines are blurred. And I like getting into these stories that maybe we aren't solving in the mainstream CISO agenda for training, or whatever is going on in just the zeitgeist of what cybersecurity is. There's just a whole bunch more, and there's a long tail of stuff that is in my opinion, part of cybersecurity, but isn't quite talked about. So I love bringing those stories around. Let's hear about that teenager who in 5th period class hacked his principal, right, on a tablet in the back of class without any as extra special tools, just curious of like, let's hop on the school Wi-Fi and see what's here. And those are just like really interesting, like when rubber hits the road kind of stories to me. It's not so much these proof of concepts or these ideas, these 10,000-foot views of what cybersecurity is or what the experts think, but it's like, all right, here's a 15-year-old causing a whole bunch of chaos. But what do you think, Mr. 15-year-old, right?
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
this is fun for me to get into these stories of like, this is what's really happening out here.
I love that. And I'm curious because I find that I'm not the best at telling stories. Did you have to work at weaving that kind of narrative storytelling element, or are you a natural storyteller, or did the stories just lend themselves to be easy to tell?
So I think I was really fascinated with, NPR type of audio journalism, right? So This American Life, Radio Lab, 99% Invisible. These stories had me so hooked and glued when I'd be listening to them in the car and getting somewhere, and it'd be like the dumbest thing, like talking about feathers on a pillow or something. But for some reason, it was so compelling, and I was glued, and I would sit in the car and wait for the story to be over. And That was great. It gave me all kinds of rushes and excitement and stuff. And so I kind of took that and I was like, well, where is that excitement? I mean, we have a lot of drama in cybersecurity world,
Yeah.
and the stories are wild. Who's crafting them in this way to make it exciting and fun and like, wow, I can't believe that happened. I mean, when you hear the news, it's kind of cold and almost dry, right? Like it's not, I mean, it's exciting to us when we're in the field and we're like, wow, that I know all about that. That's cool. That's exciting, but it's not quite palatable for maybe the average person, or you don't really understand what the exciting parts are. And so, yeah, I did want to kind of combine those two. I was like, wow, there's some really powerful audio storytelling aspects in the world. How can I combine that with cybersecurity? And yeah, that's kind of where I took it.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely like I didn't know I wanted it, and I feel like I speak for many people in chat right now. Your podcast and the dramatic audio storytelling of real events, frankly, which makes it even more compelling. It was something I didn't know I wanted, and then as soon as you get it, you're like, oh yeah, like I want all of this. So
I
let me,
remember I
Mhm.
remember going into, like, conferences, like DEF CON, for example, and just hearing some hack or watching someone demonstrate a hack and just your jaw is dropped and you're just like, "What? Well, how is this possible?" And then I try to take that back to the office and give them that same jaw-dropping experience, like, "Okay, I'm gonna set you up. I'm gonna hack your everyone's computer in this room. It's gonna be epic." And you do it, and you really want this effect from your team to be like to feel what they felt, what you felt at DEF CON. And so this is kind of also kind of that storytelling crafting of just like, how do I give the maximum effect to someone so that they can feel it deep down? And yeah, I think that I do have some natural tendency to dramatize things.
Well, yeah, well, you've nailed it. You've perfected the art, and that's what I would call it, an art that you've done. So another question I wanted to ask you about is that, like, there are so many fascinating stories out there, and like you said, you go to a conference and like you can't help but overhear all these different, really interesting stories. So how do you like? This is a tough role for you to have to play, but like, how do you select which stories to spend your time, energy, and effort on to make into a feature on Darknet Diaries? And is there any like particular element or angle that instantly draws your attention into like, this is a story I've got to do?
Yeah, so going back to those, masters of storytelling, This American Life, Radio Lab, and stuff, they've actually like written extensively on how to do audio storytelling, and one of the things is let's get some twists involved, right? So you if we have the story and it's like, well, here's where we started, here's where our goal was, and we just hit our goal, and there's really no, like, twist to it. Well, okay, that's cool, but I want something that twists, right? So,
Yeah.
here's our goal, but all went wrong, right? So, maybe we were tasked to hack into a bank, and we hacked into the bank, and we were successful, but crap, it was the wrong bank. We went to the wrong address, and we just totally owned the wrong company. Now what do we do? We're really screwed. We did something illegal. Holy cow, how do we get out of this? And I love that, right? That's a big twist. And oh my gosh, now what do we do? Do we do we tell them? Do we back out? So I look for these stories that have a big twist like that. Two twists are even better than one.
Hmm.
But I also look for stories that have an ending, right? So I don't really, I'm not a cutting news kind of guy. I'm a slow news junkie, and what I'm looking for is, all right, well, that's some interesting news. I'm going to wait 5 years to see if we can figure out who did it. Did they arrest them? How did they do it? I want all these answers, right? So everyone's telling me, oh, there's the MGM hack that happened. You got to cover it. I'm like, yeah, I'll cover it in 5 years when we find out who was behind it and how it all happened and all this kind of stuff. And I love this when you have all the information. Now let's put that whole story together, package it up, and now we've got a whole story arc, right? So I also wait for these things. So I'll have like Google alerts that'll tell me when a hacker is sentenced. And when a hacker's sentenced, now I know they were found guilty. And if they're found guilty, then I know they were arrested. And if they were arrested, they must have done something wrong. So there's this whole story arc, right? Once they're sentenced, the story is ready to be shipped. And that's kind of the stuff I'm looking for.
I love that. I really appreciate you do that because personally, I find it less satisfying if it's like, some of these stories you see on TV where it's like all this and then it's like, we'll have to see. And you feel almost unfulfilled or unsatiated because you don't have that. So I
Right.
do.
There's more questions than answers when you hear breaking news.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see everybody in chat dropping mad questions. We're going to get these to Jack. I'm just queuing them up. But absolutely love it. Also, if you would drop in chat, I personally have a favorite, Darknet Diaries. I feel like I'm not alone in having a favorite episode, although I do enjoy all of them, Jack. So if you got a favorite episode in Darknet Diaries, drop it in chat. I would love to see what other people think. I forget the name of the one that I love, but it's the one about the counterfeit money guy and how unbelievably detailed he was about getting the paper and the prints and all that stuff. I found that one really, really
Yeah, it's called Moneymaker. And yeah, that was a favorite of mine too. I chased that guy down for years before finally getting him on the show.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Even the way, like, talk about hooks in the story, like when he got arrested, that wasn't the end of the story. The way that he basically kind of held his ground against law enforcement and maneuvered his way in those really, really turbulent waters was really equally interesting. And that famous photo of him in the back of the truck. So cool, Jack.
Yeah, that was a fun one. And that's interesting because that one doesn't even have cyber involved with it, right?
Yeah.
It's just all fake stuff. And this is what I'm saying is I think that line is blurred a bit of where is the who's got the responsibility when it comes to securing our lives or our money or our technology. Yeah, it's hard to figure out whose job it is sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. People in chat talking about Lisa, Deviant. Some people said it's like picking their favorite child, choosing their favorite Darknet Diary episode. That's really funny. So, okay, so Moneymaker was not a cyber story. It had some technical complexities, but it wasn't really a deep dive technical one. I wanted to ask you this question, Jack. Like, you bridge a gap between technically savvy and then like less being less familiar with cybersecurity, like your audience members, right? You're not only communicating to like deep cyber practitioners. So how do you decide like how much technical detail to include to keep your content accessible yet informative for the audience?
Yeah, this is a great question because I really love speaking to the audience like educated adults, right? I have this kind of avatar in my head of like, here's a person who's used a computer all their life, but they're not in cybersecurity, right? So every day they're typing and they're chatting and they're connecting and they're configuring and they're troubleshooting. And they know computers inside and out because they have to use it every day, but they're not in cybersecurity and they're not even in tech. They just use it as their everyday job, right? So it's like, this person I think should be aware, but at the same, so they know things, they know they know the internet, they know social media, they know they're so far advanced, and they'll say to you, oh, I'm a total noob when it comes to computers. No, you're not. You know a lot of stuff, and I always give people just this, I treat them with a lot of respect of like, you know a lot and let's talk about some crazy geeky stuff and watch how far you follow me. And they do. And so, one time I had my aunt, I thought it was a very technical story that I was getting into. And my aunt messaged me and said, oh, that was my favorite episode. I'm like, you don't know anything about computers. How did you find that interesting at all? Like, I was so amazed. So this is why I just think people really just know a lot more than you give them credit for, or they give themselves credit for. And I want to meet them there. I like to give them, there was I think a master class, Malcolm Gladwell gave a master class thing. And one of the things was like, how much, jargon do you throw into the story? And I think what he said was, you want to throw in enough where you can feel like you're one of the cool kids on the inside crowd. Like, here's a term, like I think I covered one story where people were using the word lick as stealing stuff, and I was like, "What's this word lick?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's when you steal something online, you can hit a lick." And I'm like, "This is great! I love this kind of cool terminology," and it's really fun for the listener to get in there and learn about these cool words. Without overwhelming them. So if it's just like jargon for the sake of jargon, it's not really there. But if it's there to like give you this sense of like, hey, this is what we're talking about, this is the language we're using in this world, I think it gives the listener this extra bit of, wow, that's now I feel like one of the cool kids because I know what these words are.
Absolutely. I love it. And again, you have mastered the ability to really like walk that fine line between, technical lexicon, but still making it accessible. I mean, you have so many aspects of your podcast and your shows that just hit just right. Like they just hit And I think that's why it's led to, such great success. Now, I actually have a bunch of questions lined up, but chat is just exploding right now.
I
And
love
I
it.
love serving our community, Jack. So I'm going to flip it to them and start asking some of their questions. Space Tacos wants to know, on average, how long does it take you to like prep and research a story? I know earlier you had mentioned you'll wait, 5 years so the whole story's there. But once you decide to do it, how long does it take to prep and execute? And does it depend on the story, weeks, months, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to digest sometimes. Stories are really big. A lot of times I'll find documentaries and watch long documentaries or read whole books and, take what's in those books to turn it into something. And so yeah, there's a lot of research that goes in and reading court transcripts. I remember a couple times I've read over 200 pages of court transcripts to try to get things through. So yeah, there's just a lot of like investigation and it's not so much investigation as far as pushing the line forward and knowledge. It's just kind of gathering up all the information that people have written about over time and then using that to make the story. So I would say it's a good solid 2 weeks once I have the person ready to interview or the sources ready, and then just okay, let's start researching this and get everything ready. So yeah, a good week of research and interviews, and then another week of um, putting it all together. I mean, there's a lot of production involved. There's a lot of editing, and when I narrate, I pretty much am the world's worst narrator, where I have to say everything 3 times, and my editor is just like, "Come on, can't you read clearly the first time?" And I'm like, "No, I can't. I suck at it." So yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of involvement with putting it together once you even have all the research and writing done and the interview. It's just there's still a lot to go there.
Alana has a question that's really interesting, and it tiptoes up to the precipice and peaks over. Obviously you're dealing with a lot of like some illegal stuff, some shady stuff. How do you cope when you're dealing with some of the dark stuff that you hear that may or may not even make it into the final product?
Yeah, I mean, so I've covered CSAM a few times, right? Or just some of this really dark stuff that happens on the dark net. And I don't want to be the one that goes out there and looks at this and it discovers it and all that. So those ones I'll leave to like another journalist to be like, you go out there and figure that out and then come and report to me. And then I'll just like take your word for it or whatever. Cause I'm not gonna like say, "Hey, show me proof of
Yeah.
what you saw." Like this is ridiculous. So I do have kind of a limit of how far I'll dig. And then I know that there's other people digging further. So I'll just kind of rely on them and see what they found. But yeah, I mean, it does wear on you sometimes. Of like, oh man, there's some dark stuff. But I think overall, I have just a really positive outlook on just humanity and people, and I love people, and the world is a beautiful place, and I think that's going to be really hard to shake that out of me. So I just have a lot of positivity that I bring, and it kind of it might like draw, fall into when I'm interviewing people who are evil and stuff, right? Of just like let me see if I can understand from your perspective and not just like come at it with like, "You're evil. I can't believe how awful you are." But like, you know what? That's my first reaction. Let's put that to the side. Let me learn more about you. What was your childhood like? Did
Mhm.
you have like let me understand why you did this stuff. And I think that really goes a long way of just kind of living through the guest vicariously and being like, yeah, you know what? If I was bullied as a kid and had a broken family or whatever the case is, um, I might be doing this too. And now I'm cheering for this guy. And it's weird to be cheering for someone that you probably would really dislike if you met him in person. But for some reason, we just got to that core of them that you sympathize with them. And now it's like, well, now let's go on a story. And then when they get all arrested and stuff, you're like, okay, wait, I'm glad I wasn't actually cheering for him. It was just like kind of, I don't know. It's weird. It's a weird experience to kind of go through the roller coaster of the story sometimes.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking of Golem Fun, and I listened to the both episodes of that, and really, really complicated individually. Sounds like a really delightful guy, like someone you'd want to have a drink with. But at the same time, he's really committed some serious crimes. So
Yeah.
yeah, I could totally see that. CJ wants to know: do you prefer or do you lean towards like U.S. based stories or international? Any kind of geographical kind of? movements?
I mean, the US ones are easier, right? Because I'm here, I know the culture, I understand the legal system. I can find what's nice about the US ones is all the federal cases are public available. Typically, some of them are sealed cases, but for the most part, it's easy to just dig in there and find that. Like in the UK, those cases aren't publicly available. They don't have the transcripts available. They don't have that out there. So it's more difficult to find information of those cases, right? And so when I'm going into other countries that don't speak English, it's really even more difficult to figure it out. Like this latest one was in Pakistan, the exact episode, and I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to cut through the noise in another language, cut through the noise of like political, chit chat and like people just like not paying attention to the facts, but just they're on this political side and they want to make a lot of noise, and they do make a lot of noise. Okay, cut through that. If there's stuff that's not even irrelevant there, where's the truth in here? And there's just so much people that are just muddying the whole thing. It's very difficult to get through in a culture that's not mine, in a language that's not mine. And so it's much more challenging. I like those challenges. I like bringing stories from other countries in and hearing about what's going on there because I learn about all these cultures. And when I start going into another country to learn about the story, I'll get deep. Like I'll do like I love doing these 4K walking tours on YouTube and just kind of walk through the city of where this story takes place to just understand what's going on. And that's where I'll see people like flying kites on the street corner in a busy town. And I'm just like, wow, who's flying kites in the city? This is making no sense, right? These little curiosities take you into like new corners of like the world, and it's really fun to just get this bigger understanding of the world you're going to be talking about for the next hour, so that those little nuances could come out in the episode or in the interview.
Yeah, that's interesting and great question, CJ. I thought you were going to be like, US, but yeah, no, like the depth of why you choose these and why the pros and cons of both are really interesting. Now, you had mentioned going to conferences and overhearing chatter and wanting to share those stories. Matt McDaniel wants to know, this seems more kind of career oriented, but what kind of conferences did you go to at the beginning of your when you were doing cybersecurity? And which ones do you think are good to go starting at? Maybe you had a positive experience?
Yeah, I think when I was just starting my career, I heard about DEF CON and I was like, oh, well, I guess this is the one to go to. So I asked permission, can I go to it? And they're like, no. I'm like, my boss was like, no, we don't send people to conferences. I was like, well, can I get like time off at least? And then I'll pay for it. So they're like, sure. So I did that. And that was cool. And then I also went to RSA conference, right? Then both in the same year as like my first debut year of just let's go to conferences. And it
Mhm.
was really interesting just to see the absolute polar opposites of what the culture's like, what the people are like. Like at RSA, it's like, well, we have a solution to everything. Just buy our product. And at DEF CON, it's like everything is broken. Here, let me show you how.
Yeah.
It's like, well, there's something like really different here. And it's really fascinating to just go around. So I think if you're wanting to get a start going to conferences, the very best is to go to your local B-sides. There's probably a B-sides in your state or country that you can go to, which is either free or relatively cheap, like $10, $25 to get in a ticket. And you'll see some great talks. You'll meet some great people. And it's not so far from where you are. I think DEF CON is still the premier hacking conference to go to, and is also worth doing at some point in your life if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is funny. I don't know if you intentionally chose those two because they are so polar opposites, but I mean, you literally couldn't pick two more polarizingly different conferences for your first two.
Yeah, and it kind of teaches you like who are my people? What do I look like here, right? And I'm wearing a hoodie, so I'm like, okay, DEF CON is definitely my people. I'm gonna go to that one more often, and I did.
I love it. Chris Weaver wants to know, have you ever, getting back to your guests, have you ever had to convince anyone to be on your show?
Convince somebody.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you ask them like, hey, great story. And they're like, I don't know if I want to talk to you.
Yeah, but I'm kind of like the Columbo in that way of interviewing people, where I'm not really that pushy. I'm not really asking those hard questions. I'm more like, hey, let's just have a handshake and say hello, and I just want you to know you're on my radar. kind of thing. And
Mhm.
don't even ask sometimes of just like, hey, do you want to come on? But just now they see, okay, who's this guy? Oh, he's got this show. Let me check it out. Oh, interesting. Oh, okay. I've got a story that maybe, could share. So it's kind of like that when you're going to buy a car, the person who wants the sale least is going to get the best deal, right?
Mhm.
And so if I do this kind of non-pushy approach, it just seems to work out in a much better way of almost like getting a scared cat out of the cave, down from the tree. You don't like chase after it up there; it'll just go higher. And so you just kind of wait patiently and have a nice calm voice, and they'll come down to you. That's kind of my strategy now. In the early days, nobody knew who I was, and so I
Mhm.
had to really seek them out. And it's just the thing there was just a ton of shoulder tapping, right? So if I tap on 100 shoulders and be like, "Hey, can you come on my show?" Two will say no, 90 will not say anything, and then I'll get one yes. And I kind of design the show like by design. I want those hard to reach guests, the ones that just have never talked before or given their story, or it's just, how in the world did you find this guest? Like, I just want to keep pushing that harder and higher. I want to give you this inside view of this world that you might not have access to. And I love doing that. And so I don't mind getting a lot of rejections. I don't mind getting a lot of no's. But
Mhm.
now I've kind of built this notoriety that people are coming to me with their stories.
Well, that's the next question that I wanted to ask you, and Curiosity for Life kind of captured it in chat. But like, so I have a podcast. It's clearly not Darknet Diaries, okay? But I get people pinging me like, "Hey, I want to come on your show." It's usually because they want to push some product or something like that. But does anyone ever contact you and like just push vendors to the side? Like, does anyone contact you with like, "Hey, like I've I want to get this off my chest. Basically, I've got this story, and I need to tell it."
Yeah, I mean, you get the black hat criminals more often, but those are the ones who have some sort of, I don't know, ego or something, perhaps, to be like, "Here's what I did. Let me tell you about it," and they're excited because it was a crazy time. There's the ones that are harder to capture, are maybe like state agents, right? Like I've had NSA people on my show a few times, but where are the rest of the countries in the world? I'd love to get them on the show to be like, "Hey, tell me all the countries you hacked and all this kind of stuff." And Canada's not talking about it. UK is not talking about it. So I just kind of have to be patient there and wait for something. But yeah, it's interesting who brings me stuff. Typically, when someone does bring me something, I usually reply immediately with, "Okay, well, do you have like a subpoena or a court, an arrest record that I can look at to see your story?" Because if they stole like $1 million and then they got away with it, that's a little bit irresponsible for me to just be like, "Look at this guy. He hacked into
Yeah.
some place, stole $1 million, and is living out there free." So it's I kind of have to wait for that. Like if somebody tells me that, I'm like, "Okay, we can talk now, but I'm gonna wait 5 years and see what happens to you."
That's so funny, and I'll just tell you, if anyone from Lazarus Group is watching and wants to tell your side of the Bangladeshi bank heist, that Jack's available. So
Yeah, definitely. Let's go.
yeah, so just continuing on this theme through its whole arc, Gary wanted to know, have you ever had to drop a story like you put it in the time, energy, and effort, and then you're like, actually, this isn't, I can't.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even the first episode, right? It was a really good story, and it was just so big, and it just kept going and going and going and going. And because it was my first episode, I was like, "Man, this I'm not good enough to be able to do this story justice. This is such a good story," and I still haven't even done it. It's the Alberto Gonzalez story,
Mhm.
and the or Albert Gonzalez, and the story was just so complex. And so I wrote the entire first script out. I even started recording it, and it was just going great. And I was just like, "This is just not my first episode. I got to do something much simpler and give myself a good solid win for this first one." So that one I just threw out, and I still haven't even picked it up. And there's a possibility that he's going to get out of prison soon, and I might do it soon. But anyway, there's other ones that just, as I look at it more, I'm just like, yeah, this is giving a voice to something I don't want to give to, or it's highlighting a story that I just don't want to highlight. Because like I said, I have a real positive outlook for humans in the world. And if I put this out there, it really does give more strength to somebody who maybe I don't want to give strength to. So I do have that kind of thing where sometimes I'm just like, yeah, this one, I just really don't like this person. And sometimes just that hesitation of just like waiting a few weeks of radio silence or a month pulls out something in them that's just unreal. Like, hey, how come you haven't ran my story yet? Are you being a jerk? I'm gonna dox you. And now it's like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. You're actually a real mean person. I'm glad I didn't actually publish your stuff.
Thanks for making this super easy for me to make this decision.
Yeah.
We're talking to Jack Rhysider, founder, creator, host of Darknet Diaries. I'm sure many of you know who he is, but if you're just tuning in and you don't know, this is his podcast right here, Darknet Diaries. There's a audio version, which is the one most people know, but you have released it on YouTube. I just dropped a link in chat, so everybody can go check that out if they don't know about Jack and his podcast yet. Jack, just real quick, I'm curious. Moving over to YouTube, obviously the graphics are great. The story is the same audio. Was that a big lift to get on YouTube? I know you've had major success over there.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube themselves reached out and they convinced me to come over. And I was like, listen, I got nothing. I just got audio. And they're like, okay, well, let's collaborate. Let's brainstorm together. So I got on the phone with some YouTube people and I said, okay, what are you seeing for other podcasts and stuff? And I ended up coming up with getting an animator to animate parts of it. Actually, the whole thing is animated, but it's kind of on a loop. And so coming up with like, what is it going to look like? There was just like a 3-month process. And then actually making the thing is the 15-second intro took about 3 months that an animator made. And then at the same time, I was working on the looping thing that just goes on through the whole process. And so I actually fired up After Effects and created, because I mean, it's one thing just like having this idea in your head and then trying to explain it. And then the animator is just like not anywhere near it. And then it's another thing of just like, I'll just do it myself. And that way I get it exactly the way I want. Right. Or at least close enough to give it to someone to be like, okay, it's close, go. And so and really for me, and all the artwork I make on the show, it's a process where I have to like try and fail like many times before finding that perfect picture or that perfect image that I'm looking for. And so there was quite a bit of animations that I spent days on trying to get to look great, and then looking at it and being like, this is garbage. I gotta start all over. And I did that a few times until I finally got that. It's kind of like an underwater desk. The desk, like it has some water below it, and there's a server rack and the things and the lights blinking and stuff. I started with an image that my artist made that I told them, what I want to look like. And then from there, I animated it. Even all the screens and stuff, I did all the animation myself.
I love it. And Chris Young, just so you know, Jack, we got you tick one more up on the subscriber or the listener model. Chris,
all right.
Chris, just finding out about Darknet Diaries. Chris, you got an entire catalog of excellent content to look forward to, my friend. Toasty Pops has what's that, Jack?
I hope he likes it.
Yeah. So a lot of people like upvoted this question in chat. Toasty Pops wants to know, how do you convince subjects to come clean on talking about their shady deeds? And what do you do to fact check them?
Yeah, I mean, that's the first question, or do you want to talk about the worst day of your life, the things you're most unproud of, like you're most ashamed of, and the worst, and and make sure that that's where we're going. And before, I don't want any gotchas or any surprises here. We're going there. And yeah, I mean, they know that coming out. So sometimes a lot of so at first, I remember it was I was kind of scared and nervous to ask people these questions of just like, this is awful story. Let's talk about it, right? It just seems horrible. Like for what? To let a podcast go out there for some content on the internet, drag someone through this harrowing experience once again in their life. But honestly, most of the people who I do go through that come and tell me like, wow, that was therapeutic. I feel like I had a session with my therapist to just kind of lay it all out and explore some of these things. Because honestly, it's not just like, hey, what'd you do? But it was like, all right, so you hit enter. Then how'd you feel right after that? Or did you hesitate at all before doing it? Like, what was going through your head that second before pushing the button? And then what was it? What was like? What were your feelings like? And nobody's asking about feelings when they're getting interviewed by other journalists and stuff. And so for them to just kind of explore their feelings about the whole thing is cathartic in so many ways, to just open up and let out, and we start finding new things that they didn't even know about themselves, and it's really an experience for them. And so once I learned like a few people actually enjoyed explaining themselves in that way, then yeah, I think it's that I just became kind of fearless at just asking these tough questions. And then what do I do to fact check them? I mean, there's a lot of things, right? So court transcripts, police records. Sometimes I'll phone up the friend or a family member, um, and just say, "Hey, this is what I need to make sure is correct and stuff. Did they actually do this, or did they say this and all that?" Well, and we'll do what I can. I typically am the only one doing that sort of thing, so I can only go so far, and I've got a schedule to get things out, so it's not as thorough as maybe a solid journalistic team of people, but I do what I can. And again, what I think I rely on is kind of my background in cybersecurity, where if they'll tell me something, I'll kind of look at it in my head and be like, is that even like possible? Like, hold on, you have to explain this more, right? And so as they explain it, do they sound like they know what they're talking about,
Mhm.
or are they just making stuff up at this point, right? So I'll really scrutinize like their methods and their techniques and their thought process, and sometimes to just kind of squeak out some of that BS stuff that might be lingering in there.
Yeah. And Gary says he really appreciates that your stories don't always have those Hollywood or happy endings. I want to pivot here. This is a great question because we were talking about cathartic experiences and kind of the emotional pieces of it. So BSEC says, you took some time off recently. I know you're posting a little less frequently than you have in the past. Jack, do you ever get burned out? And how do you deal with it if you do?
Yeah, well, I mean, I slowed down my release schedule to go from every 2 weeks to once a month, and this really helped with, it wasn't burnout, but it was definitely tired. I love doing what I do, and, I'm just kind of signed up for this thing that every episode, I just have to climb another mountain. There's no, like, fast way to the next episode. It's always the hard way and heavy lifting and just a ton of
Mhm.
work, and so I kinda just know that that's gonna be there. But I think the thing that keeps me from burnout is really the passion, right? It's I read a lot of the comments, and there's people who are, disappointed with some of the content that I'm putting out there and stuff, but honestly, truly, I'm going after what excites me and the stories that excite me and the stuff that I love hearing about or I'm learning about or is just so curious to me. And that I think is what pulls the story through and what makes the show interesting when I have passion about it. If I were to just do what maybe the crowd enjoys, but it's not quite what I enjoy, then we're just kind of going through the motions now, and it might not be as exciting. But when I'm finding things in each story that I'm just like, Wait, what? What happened? Tell me again. I've never. This is crazy to me. I think the story really comes to life, even if it's not. Well, this isn't the Darknet Diaries I liked at the beginning or whatever. It's okay. It's changing. I'm learning. I'm changing. My likes are changing, but I'll always be true to my passion and what's interesting to me, and I think that's my North Star always, and it keeps me from getting burned out.
I love it. Yeah, I do love it, and I'm 100% with you. As a content creator, also, it is you got to do something that makes you happy and fills your cups. And it's so like you said, some people will write comments about like it not being their favorite episode, which I think you're being incredibly polite, probably about what some of those comments are. And it's like, you come on, like it's you don't even know what it took to do all this and the amount of enjoyment that it's bringing other people. So yeah, I'm with you 100%. Deb, what's up, Deb? Good to see you. Deb wants to know, your episodes are like your children, right? Is there one that you particularly have an affinity for? Maybe not your favorite, but like your favorite to produce, your favorite experience, something happened.
Hi, Deb. The I think the one Xbox Underground is a real close one to my heart because not only is it one of the most downloaded episodes, but it really is kind of like when I started the show. Where do I want this? How do like there's this when you're a creator, there's this gap between where you imagine this thing to be and where you're actually making. And when you make it, and you step back and you look at it, you're like, oh, I wish this was better. I have so much higher hopes for this show, but I just don't have it in me right now to get there, right? And so when Xbox Underground came out, this was really, I mean, I spent a year on this one. I talked with so many other people. I talked with four different voices on the show, right? And so just to bring in all these voices was a real treat. Usually there's only one voice, and then to do all this fact checking and research and talking with people behind the scenes and all this kind of stuff was just, I really wanted to get it right, and I wanted to get the story right, and I spent so long on it to do it. And I can't sustainably do that every episode, right? I mean, that took a year to put together, or at least 9 months, and that's worth it sometimes to hit those high notes of like, wow, we're gonna have a grand slam episode here, and then kind of put some some filler ones in between to get you there. But yeah, I mean, that one I think was real special, as just far as this is where I imagine the show to be, and maybe that was the high watermark. Maybe I'll never get there again, but that was definitely worth the ride because it was just so difficult to do.
I personally have not heard that one, so I'm going to flag that one. And which is even
Xbox
more, huh? What's that?
Xbox Underground was the name of it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I'm super pumped to like have new content that I can go check out. But to your point about Xbox Underground, Moneymaker, Space Taco asked a question that I'm sure a lot of people are curious to know. How do you come up with the episode names?
Oh yeah, I mean, at first I was trying to come up with like, okay, so what I'm trying to do with the episode names is I'm trying to be as least clickbaity as possible, but looking for the long term, right? So with a lot of these stories, it's like, well, I've already waited 5 years for this story to come out. I don't need it to be like an immediate success or relevant right now.
Mm.
I want it to be relevant for the next 10 or 20 years. And if I put these titles in the podcast of like, you'll never believe what this guy did to steal $20 million, then that just seems like it's just so immediate and stuff. And I want it to be more of a legacy, lasting longer and less clickbaity. And so that's why I put maybe this really short titles. Just I think the shortest title I had was just like a 2-letter or 3-letter word. And it's just like, okay. And I love that my audience trusts me to be like, I don't know what this is about, but I'm so excited about it. I'm jumping in. I don't even want to read the description. I trust you to just take me on this wild adventure. And that's really all I want is just, come on. It doesn't matter what the title is. Let's go on an adventure. And I think that's the fun of it. Now when it comes to YouTube, I do have a producer that's helping me put things together, and he's convinced that we've got to get clickbaity titles in YouTube. So YouTube has a little bit, it's definitely very different in the titles, and I just let him run with it, and we'll see if he has it's kind of a race to see who can have more views, his titles or my titles.
Yeah, that's funny. You gotta sacrifice to the algorithm gods on YouTube. No
I
doubt.
don't like doing that. I like drawing my own path and taking my own route.
So there's a lot of emotion in chat about episode 59. Was episode 59 the courthouse as frustrating to make as it was for me to listen to? And I see somebody in chat saying they were crazy. They were pissed when they were listening to it. I'm sure not at your content or your quality, but the
No, no.
story itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this one, these social engineers who tried to break into the courthouse and were arrested for doing
Yep.
it, even though they had permission to do it. And it's an interesting story to cover because we don't really have social engineers getting arrested. Usually, when they do, they're able to get out of it because it's like, hey, actually, I was paid to break into this place. It's cool. But in this one, it was a little different. I think what I really like trying to do is, as I'm telling stories, is not so much leave you really angry about this or upset about that, but really more of in a neutral state where you were angry at the beginning or in the middle or wherever, but it somehow got resolved at the end where you're like, you know what, this is more complex than I realized. I'm less angry now. I understand the other side and why they did it. And I don't think I represented the other side well enough. I think the sheriff probably had some good points. I probably should have called the sheriff up and said, hey, do you want to talk about it? Because it actually happened that they went back to the town. Some people, such as there was a little conference there in that town, and the sheriff came, and the security teams were able to talk with him and say, "Hey, here's where you did wrong." And the sheriff's like, "Well, here's where you have to understand my point of view." And I think things got a lot better. And I think there might have been some problems of me like doing the show to actually, wage some complaints. Like people, I think listeners were calling the sheriff and complaining like, "Hey, what are you doing, knucklehead?" So I don't want people to get outraged in that way where they're calling the sheriff in
Oh my
some little
God.
town to get mad at him. I really think that everything is just so complex, and I'd rather leave you with just the world is more complex than I realized, and my initial emotions may not be trusted. Right? This is I love when you learn something more about yourself when we're talking about these stories. So yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't get so mad at it when I was making it. I got more mad at myself after for not balancing the story more.
Yeah, well, you definitely tapped into the emotions of the audience base. I mean, the chat is popping off right now. That one upset him. This one got me mad at authorities. The courthouse one, I remember that. Very emotionally strong episode.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing here is that I recognize, at least as a person who reads the news, that most of the news that comes out and these things that make us mad are typically one-offs. They're just so rare, they never happen. And when things are just so like random things that happen in the world that are just rare and just somebody made a mistake, I don't want to like just go full on. Everything has to be perfect in the world. Nobody's allowed to make mistakes. I understand that people make mistakes. I mean, I interview people who've made a lot of mistakes, right? And I try to give them the benefit of the doubt of like, yeah, everyone makes mistakes. So I don't typically like to highlight these really obscure edge cases as being, oh, the world is going to crazy, the cops can't be trusted, all this kind of stuff. Because it's one case. Show me another one where somebody was arrested for social engineering and breaking into some place and then not getting out of it. Like it's not existent. This was probably one of the only ones that are in existence. So I mean, people get caught by the police, but they get out of it before getting, a record made or whatever. So it's just I don't know. This is kind of the way my head works.
Um, Hold on. Gary Sturgiadis had a great question, and by the way, I agree with some of the people in chat who are saying like, like appreciate you, trying to be a balanced and get the story, and comment on it and allow different parties to be involved instead of basically trying to like not weaponize, but trying to like spin the story so it's pushing a specific narrative too. So I 100% agree with that. Gary asked a question that is very curious. So Jack, I think it's absolutely baller that YouTube reached out to you and was like, "You need to start a channel. Like, we need you." Like, that's complete opposite for everybody else.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
was rare.
I mean, it's cool. In fact, I might even ask you a follow-up question on that. But because of that, obviously, people reach out to you. Like, have you ever been? Gary says threatened, but can I change that word and just say, have you ever been asked to decline a story, or have you ever been asked to stop pursuing something?
Let me think here. Stop pursuing. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is when I was doing that one where some people were stealing cryptocurrency. I reached out to the DA that prosecuted the case, and I was like, "Here's the story I'm doing." And she's like, "Well, who are you interviewing?" I'm like, "The criminal who did it." She said, "Well, why don't you interview the victims, right? Like, why are you interviewing the criminal? You're just going to glorify the thing." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I don't think so. I think he gets arrested at the end, and you were his district attorney, so you know." And that was kind of funny to be like, "Yeah, you're like from law enforcement. Don't glorify it. Go this way instead." So that was kind of their attempt at trying to do things. I don't think I've been told to not pursue a story. There are a lot of sources that I've reached out to that have been very scared to talk about stories, right? Sometimes we have to change their voice, and a lot of times it's just like, no way, I'm never going to say my story because I've been threatened in really big ways to cover it. And so what I do, I think a lot of times is like, I think the NSO story is the episode 100 is my most downloaded one. It just recently hit 1 million downloads. And
Yeah, that's
the
awesome.
the thing is there is like I was in a lot of talks with NSO, right? So I was like, all right, NSO, come on the show. This is what I'm gonna say about you. I'm gonna say all these bad things. Do you want to have a say in this, or should we just let it go like that? And they're like, no, we wanna come on. Let's do an interview. So I was like, great. But their classic technique is just to string it along so that the story never comes out. So
Mm.
like month after month after month, I'm like, okay, you ready yet? Yeah, we're almost ready. And it just kept going and going, right? So I was like, look, I drop dead date. I'm gonna publish here, or you're gonna be on before this date or whatever. And so I was totally fine with this because all of the stuff that I was sharing about them has already been published, right? And they were really scared. They're like, well, what are you going to publish about us? And I was like, I'm going to publish everything that's in that story and that story and that story. And if I can fall back on, no, journalists have already published this, don't come at me, bro. Go after that
Right.
journalist. Then I feel like there's a buffer of like safety there whenever I'm getting into places that are dangerous, right? Some stories that nobody's ever covered and they're not so dangerous. But when it comes to the dangerous ones, those are the ones that I'm just like, I want this. I do not want to be the breaking news one on this one because I might disappear.
Yeah, definitely listen to your gut on that. Definitely don't want anything bad happening. Just for doing some journalism. A lot of questions in here. We've got about 8 minutes left, so I do want to kind of mix it up a little bit, Jack. There's some questions in here around more like production related stuff. So I kind of wanted to do a little bit of like a lightning round, if you would. But Chris wanted to know, like, how do you come up with the music for your shows on YouTube?
Yeah, I do most of the music design. I've had a few music designers, but mostly it's me. And I have a place called Epidemic Sound, which is where I download the music from. I have a license to use the music. And I'll just think, okay, what is this? Is this a tense moment, a sad moment, a cool moment? Like, what's the emotion here? And then it allows me to like search for those kind of emotions in their database. And so I'll find a song with that emotion. And yeah, it's just a matter of listening to dozens of songs, trying to find the one that just fits perfectly. And it's really a fun experience to just go through 'cause, I mean, there's a lot of artistic value when it comes to throwing in music with the storytelling. And when somebody loves that kind of artistic flair to it, that really gives me like wings to go further because artistry is just really something. It's different than science or something. It's wild. It's a strange thing.
Do you identify yourself kind of as a creative, like a artistic, like
Mhm.
yeah?
Yeah, I mean, even in my writing, I feel very creative when I'm writing and trying to come up with different angles to see things or different ways to express it or something like that. I don't want to just be the same repetitive voice out there as everyone else. I want to find a new way to do it. And so, yeah, very creative.
Yeah, I would I feel like I speak for chat when I say that, like, you can tell that you take the time to put in and make it like a high kind of premium product than just basically doing what people like YouTube gurus tell you to do, is just like crank out and do quantity over quality. So I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's kind of two schools of thoughts there. In podcasting land, we have hardcore history and maybe Gary Vaynerchuk, right? So Gary Vaynerchuk is going to produce 4 or 5 episodes of his podcast a week. He just can't do enough, and he's just going to interview everyone. And just as soon as he's got a thought in his mind, he's hitting record, and he's like, "All right, I'm coming at you with a quick bit here. I've got this idea," and his idea is just the more content, the better. But hardcore history is like, we're going to make 1 episode every 4 months. But it's going to be great, I promise. And I love that instead because Dan Carlin from Hardcore History he said this in an interview and I love it. He said, I want you to be fully caught up on my show and not have anything unlistened to. And I'm like, I'm the same way. I want you to be fully caught up and wanting more, wanting more, wanting more. And that's my strategy. So there's a lot of different strategies out there that work. My strategy is that.
I love it. And I'm going to show on screen here Dan Carlin's hardcore history. If you don't know about it, I know we're here to talk about Jack and Darknet Diaries, but if you don't know Dan Carlin's hardcore history, absolutely check it out. Be warned, I think the shortest episode he has is like 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
His episodes are outrageous. I loved his like 30-hour podcast on Japan's role in World War II. Anyways, I'm a huge fan of Dan. Like I haven't thought about him in a minute, but going back to your art stuff, Jack, who makes the art for the site and for the merch and stuff? Are you involved in that design?
Yeah, I think so. I go through the process of probably trying out 20 or 50 different designs. So I'll either scribble things out on a piece of paper and I'll just start drawing randomly, or I'll use, recently I've been using Midjourney to just start typing in prompt and see what Midjourney thinks of this or that. And it has no clue. It doesn't really help, but I just keep feeding it random things. And probably after like 100 iterations of what does Midjourney think of this or that, it finally gives me a glimpse into something where I'm just like, wait a minute, you've got something there. You didn't hit it on the head, but you gave me a really good idea. And so then I could take that idea and say, okay, here, let's format it, right? So then I get close to my idea, and then I can take that and I can give it to my artist, and I say, artist, this is the idea, go make it. And the better, the more crystallized I have my idea to give it to the artist, the better that's going to be in the end. And because like I said, it probably takes me 4 hours to come up with each piece of artwork, just the concept alone. And then it probably takes that artist another 4 hours or maybe 10 hours. I don't know how long. He usually gets back in like a day or two. So I can't imagine it being a long time, but it probably takes him quite a while to draw it out and do it. So yeah, it's a collaboration piece.
I love it. We've only got a few minutes left. So, Jack, I want to ask you, I mean, obviously I'm going to bring your podcast up on stage here. This is Darknet Diaries, Jack's podcast. It's phenomenal. It's won awards. I love it. I know many people in chat will praise all of its merits. Any future projects coming up? Are you spinning up a different podcast, maybe a new episode coming out soon that you want to tease? Anything to give us a little peek into the future?
Gosh, there's so many things I have passions for that I really want to work on. There's multiple books and other stories that are unrelated that I'd like to go into. This in the last year, I've really been focusing internally, right, and getting kind of existential myself, and doing a lot of meditation and philosophy, and it's given me a lot of ideas. And there might be something there that, I mean, there's been a lot of writing, tons and tons of writing, hundreds of thousands of words written just about philosophy and personal ideas and thoughts and stuff that might come out into something someday. But for the most part, I am definitely full steam ahead on Darknet Diaries, and will be continue to release episodes every month.
Excellent. Are you planning on attending any conferences?
Yeah. Yep. I've got Cactus Con in a week in Phoenix, Arizona, and DEF CON planned for August.
Oh, very nice. At the convention center. Did you see InfoSec Twitter all abuzz about about that?
It's a big change.
Yeah, it really was. Well, all right, Jack. Well, actually, you know what? It's 5:28. We got one more minute. Chris Weaver has a great question. I love asking this question of guests. Any books, Jack? What, cyber related or not, personal, whatever. Any books you like to recommend? I'm a huge reader. I love reading.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a list of books on my website, darknetdiaries.com/books.
Okay.
You might want to pull up that page. So these are so like Kevin Mitnick, I think, had a book called Ghost in the Wires, and I read this before I even got into my show. And when I read that book, I was just like, more of this. I want more of these hacking stories that are just like, take me on this journey. And so that was kind of one of the early influences, right? Is that book there, as well as
Nicole Pelroth, her writing style is amazing too.
Yeah, so all these will take you on similar journeys of my show that as soon as I see them, I put them on here, and they're great. Cuckoo's Egg, that was the other one that was really influential to me, is Cuckoo's Egg.
Yeah, Cliff, just telling a story. I love it. So there you go, Chris. That was a way better answer than I thought Jack was going to give. Not that I thought you were going to give a trash answer. I just thought you'd be like, oh, I love this book. Like, you had a whole website prepared for that answer, which is phenomenal. Thank you, Jack. So, all right. So we've been talking with Jack Rhysider, creator and host of Darknet Diaries, for the last hour, which, by the way, absolutely flew. Go check out his pod, Darknet Diaries. You can get it on audio podcast apps like, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the normal places. and on YouTube as well, which congratulations. It looks like you have like 300,000 subs on YouTube, which is, fantastic. You get the silver play button, Jack?
Yeah, I got it. It's great.
Nice. That's cool. All right, guys. All right. Well, I appreciate it, Jack, for you taking the time out of your schedule and coming, hanging out with us. Chat, you guys are amazing. Your questions were on fire. Absolutely the best. We'll be back next Thursday with our guest for next week, who is skipping my mind right now, but that's okay. I'm Jerry. Thank you very much, Jack, and we will see all of you next time.
This was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. If you enjoyed that content, keep the cybersecurity train going by connecting with the other Simply Cyber community resources. We have the Discord server that's lively and always keeps the conversation going. You can connect with me directly on LinkedIn. And also every single weekday morning on the Simply Cyber channel, we're doing live daily cyber threat briefings, 8 a.m. Eastern time, as well as Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We're doing live stream interviews with industry experts, and we produce videos that we push out every